Hello and welcome back. It is now October 15th. We're halfway through October and the weather couldn't really be all that much nicer. It was actually a low last night of 10 degrees in Nobleford, so warmer than some nights in June, but we did have a little bit of frost on Thursday, Friday here last week. So we are starting to see a little bit of frost effect on some of these plants, but it's looking like the weather this week should be pretty good. But let's take a look at what's going on. This volunteer barley, you can see there is a little bit of frost damage from some of those frost events last week on some of the leaf tips, but the overall plants are still doing fine. These ones shouldn't be though, because they did get sprayed with glyphosate last week. So in a few more days, we should start seeing more symptoms on these, and they should really start to go down. Now let's take a quick look, see what our soil temperatures are after the warm weather on the weekend here. So right surface temperature, we're at 8 degrees. Let's go down an inch or so here. You can see we're losing a lot of our soil moisture. We've really been drying out with that warm wind the last few days. Yeah, still about 8 degrees there. So right now that soil temperature is pretty good for fall applied residual, but it's probably going to come up a bit here this afternoon once the sun comes out. So we'll have to kind of monitor today, but I think overall this week is going to be kind of the start of the application of any of our fall residuals. Here we have a field of Dryland pea stubble, and as you can see, we do have some volunteer peas, some of which are getting to be a fairly good size. There's even a few around the headlands that are actually starting to push out flowers. But other than that, this field is still remarkably clean. These fields were treated with Authority Supreme in the spring and were pretty well weed free. So there is, a little bit of frost damage in them here and there. You can see a little bit of off coloration. But for the most part, they're still relatively healthy, but it sounds like we should be getting a good frost this coming weekend, so that'll probably take care of this volunteer at that time. But otherwise, field's pretty clean, just a few stink weeds here and there. Silaging is pretty much finished this week. We got a pretty nice pile going on here. This is about 5 quarters worth of corn in this pile here, so pretty good amount in there. Should keep those cows well fed for the winter. I don't think there's too much standing corn left, and I think it might be some fields around Picture Butte still, but I think by the end of the week a lot of that is going to get wrapped up. Cover crop fields are coming along really nice. I haven't been in one of these for about 2 weeks here now, and there's been substantial growth since I was here last. There is still a little bit of yellow dwarf kind of showing up on some of the oats here and there, but it's actually very, very minor. For the most part, a lot of the oats are just starting to push out heads. They're looking pretty good. The brassicas, there is 2 different varieties in here, which is why it has kind of a bit of a mottled effect, but they are doing pretty good. They've now long since outgrown any of the effects of the flea beetles from a few weeks ago. There is some weeds and stuff in here. You can see we got some stork's bill in here. That's these little purple flowers here with the geranium-like leaves underneath. There's some mallow, stuff like that in here. Not much we can do about that without spraying out the brassicas at the same time though, so it's just kind of a necessary evil in these fields. But there should be some pretty good grazing in here for cattle this fall. Oh, we've now finished harvesting potatoes at this farm, at least anyways. All these acres are gone and in storage, so everything is looking pretty good. Now, normally we'd be coming in here seeding winter wheat after potatoes, but it is now October 15th, so it is a bit late for seeding any winter wheat. I mean, you could still do it if we get a couple weeks of nice weather to get it established, but there'd be no crop insurance coverage if you were to do so, so we are not going to be doing that. We're just going to be spreading some manure on here to protect these fields from winter wind erosion. Here we have a nice field of irrigated winter wheat. This has gone into canola stubble. You can see we do have a few weeds here and there. We got some relatively large canola as well as lots of small canola in here. There's also some dandelions and a few other perennial weeds like some alfalfa in here, because this was an alfalfa field last year. So this field, we are seeing a little bit of trouble here and there with some emergence. You can see we've got some pretty severe crusting in some places. Winter wheat is pretty tough. You can see it has forced this guy up and is coming out around it. There's still a ball underneath here, so that is, reducing the stand in a few small localized areas, but overall the stand itself is pretty good, just big enough with rows clear enough I can fly the drone now, and I'm not finding any sign of cutworms in this field either. Typical fall weather today. It was a beautiful calm morning, and now the wind is coming up like crazy. I was just trying to fly this half section of winter wheat with the drone, and I barely got finished. Had to fly back about 10 feet off the ground with the wind speed increasing, but she is down on the ground safe, so off to the next field, which I don't think I'll be able to fly because it's on a hilltop. My last field of corn silage by Picture Butte is getting cut right now. About half the field is done. Last week this field was still very green. There was very little dry down in the field at all, even though the ears were 50-60% milk line. So now you can see it is rapidly drying down. We do have a few ears are hanging low. You can see we got some danglers in here. I'm not really seeing any sign of corn borer or anything like that. It's just the variety tends to do that. You can see these ears are pretty good. We're definitely drying down, losing moisture. You can see the gaps between the kernels there, so we're approaching physiological maturity there. So overall, looking pretty good. Sounds like it's yielding pretty well as well. Here along the west headland of this field on the windy side, there's a good example of what we sometimes call green snap in corn. So this patch here, pretty significant. You can see we do have some lodged stems here, and we have some pretty significant bends here. And this happens when you get really high winds, when the corn stalk is growing rapidly. So you can see here where this plant would have basically been bent over in like a hot wind as it was growing. So it continued to grow that way, and then it straightened itself back out and grew vertically again. So that does weaken that whole stem, of course, and make it more susceptible to lodging, which is what we're seeing here. Winter wheat fields are starting to find a few more winter annuals every day that I'm out here now. So we got quite a few dandelions popping up here and there. We got some stinkweed, we got some flexweed like this guy here. You know, here's a little dandelion. Here's another one over here. So they're definitely up and at 'em. Now, there is still some time with, you know, some of the warmer weather this week. You know, if we get wind-free days, you can come in and spray something, you know, like 2,4-D or octane, something along those lines to help clean up some of those winter annuals. But I think most guys, we will wait for spring. We'll try to get some more germination. Some of these fall annuals here, they are predicting rain for next week, so we might be able to get a few more weeds up and at them next week, and who knows what the weather will be like after that, so we might be spraying in the spring. Well, the sorghum crop has been frosted and is drying down. Now, there is still quite a bit of moisture in those stems. They're going to hang onto that moisture for quite a while, so we want this to dry down a bit more to make sure there's no nitrate or prussic acid concerns before grazing. Now, some of it has been swathed. The swaths will generally dry down a lot faster, but we're going to try doing some standing grazing as well as swath grazing using electric fence and see what works best for this farm. Well, it's turning into yet another windy, cool morning out here this morning, although the sun is out and I think we should get into the high teens. Soil temperature is now rapidly starting to decrease with some of these, 0 degree or 1 degree temperatures overnight. I do not have my thermometer with me at the moment, but I'm out in a rye field here, so just been scouting this. I did fly the drone over this field earlier before the wind came up, and I'm not seeing any patches of cutworms or anything, but that is not to be unexpected. So right now, like a lot of the cutworm species would be looking for that would be, causing stand loss in the spring, they're going to be some pretty small young juveniles right now. They'll probably only really be maybe a centimeter long. So, right now it's kind of difficult to find them, and they're not really creating any patches of damage yet, but it would be nice to, be able to determine whether we have any in the area and which fields we need to be really watching in the spring. A lot of these rye fields did have some pretty high cutworm numbers in the spring, so it'd be nice to get a head start on some of the spring work by finding out where they are now. Well, it's a frosty Friday morning out here this morning. We were at least -2 for a couple of hours last night. You can still see some visible frost on these leaves here, so I think we are going to see some damage on some of this volunteer from the frost, and things are going to start to go downhill. I don't know if it'll be enough to actually kill this volunteer barley or not, but it'll definitely frost the leaf tips at minimum anyways. So last couple days we have had lower afternoon temperatures, and I think now our soil temperature is going to be more than cold enough to really get into those fall applications of residual products. And that'll be it for this week. It looks like we're expecting some cooler weather at the end of the weekend here coming up, with the possibility of rain or snow on Monday, Tuesday, so we'll have to see how that happens. This may be the last video of the season. I'm spending a little bit less time in the fields every day now, with more time doing quotes and planning for next year, so we will maybe see you next week, or maybe not. Even without the news from the field episodes, there will continue to be videos throughout the winter on this channel, both with meeting highlights and stuff like that, as well as specific product updates. And I'll probably get around to doing something with all the drone footage that I've taken this year as well, so stay tuned for that in the weeks ahead.